I was born 4 minutes after my twin brother Ethan, and somehow those 4 minutes made all the difference in the eyes of my parents, Michael and Catherine Parker. We may have shared the same womb, but to them it seemed there was only one real child worth their attention and investment. And unfortunately for me, it wasn't Avery Parker. From my earliest memories, I noticed the stark difference in how they treated us. Ethan always got the newest, shiniest, and most desirable things. He received the cool action figures and electronic toys, while I made do with hand-me-downs from our cousins. He got brand new clothes at the start of each season, while I wore whatever still fit from last year. These material differences were just the surface of a much deeper disparity. When Ethan cried, my mother would drop everything: dinner preparations, phone calls, her own rest, and rush to comfort him, wrapping him in warm hugs and gentle reassurances. But when I tripped and scraped my knee on the sidewalk, all I heard was, "You're a tough girl, Avery. Shake it off." I'd be handed a paper towel and sent back outside to play as if my pain didn't warrant the same concern. As a child, I quickly learned that to be noticed in our household, I had to do something truly extraordinary. Ordinary tears or minor accomplishments weren't enough. No one paid attention unless I went above and beyond. I vividly remember one incident when we were about 5 years old. Ethan and I were playing at the neighborhood park, and he wanted to climb the tall metal jungle gym. He got scared halfway up and started crying. Though I was frightened too, I climbed all the way to the top and even jumped down from a moderate height to show him it was okay. I hoped my parents would praise my courage, but Dad ran straight to Ethan first, hugging him and telling him what a brave boy he was for even trying, though he hadn't made it even halfway up. Dad glanced at me, standing there, dust on my knees from the landing, and simply muttered, "Be careful, Avery. You know you could hurt yourself." That was it. No recognition of my bravery, no words of pride or approval. That moment became the template for our family dynamic for years to come. The harder I tried to prove I deserved attention, the more indifferent they became. Meanwhile, Ethan could flash a smile or accomplish some trivial task, and my parents would shower him with praise as if he'd discovered the cure for cancer. I carefully hid my jealousy and confusion. It's difficult for a child to understand why they receive less love than their sibling. Many nights I cried myself to sleep, clutching the worn teddy bear my grandmother had given me. Grandma Grace was the only person who looked at me with genuine warmth and affection. She lived in another state, so we rarely saw each other. But during her visits, I basked in the love and attention that my parents couldn't or wouldn't give me. When we started elementary school, the disparity became even more pronounced. Ethan would bring home a craft project made of cardboard and glue, ordinary with visible flaws, and my mother would exclaim, "This is absolutely brilliant, Ethan. How did you create something so beautiful? You're so talented." Meanwhile, I was beginning to show real talent in writing. I won certificates in story competitions and received special recognition from my teachers for my creative abilities. But at home, these accomplishments were met with lukewarm responses. "Well, good job, Avery, but don't get cocky about it." And I could hear the tension in their voices, as if they were reluctant to acknowledge that I could achieve anything significant without their support or encouragement. I threw myself into my studies, avoiding complaints or dramatic displays of emotion because I knew they would be futile. When we were about 10, Ethan and I brought home our report cards on the same day. Mine was filled with straight A's, while his showed a mix of C's with a couple of B's. My parents glanced at my perfect grades and simply nodded, saying, "Well, you're a smart girl. That's expected." But looking at Ethan's mediocre report card, they exclaimed, "Wow, 3 B's! That's fantastic, Ethan. We're so proud of you." I remember how my heart sank that day. It felt like the reward for my hard work had been handed to someone else, and this pattern repeated itself over and over again throughout our childhood. As we grew older, the gap in our family dynamic only widened. My parents firmly believed that Ethan needed their constant attention and support. He was more sensitive, more vulnerable, more in need of guidance. And I, in their estimation, could handle myself. "You'll figure it out, Avery," they'd say. "You always do." Their confidence in my self-sufficiency became their excuse for neglect. Eventually, I resigned myself to the fact that I wouldn't receive much emotional support from my parents. But resigning myself didn't mean giving up. On the contrary, their indifference pushed me forward with even greater determination. I was constantly proving, not so much to them anymore, but to myself, that I was worth something, that I mattered even if they couldn't see it. Middle school brought new challenges and even clearer evidence of my parents' favoritism. By 7th grade, I had developed a passion for mathematics and analytical thinking. My teachers noticed my aptitude and recommended advanced classes, which I eagerly embraced. Meanwhile, Ethan struggled with basic algebra, but received endless patience and tutoring sessions from our parents. One afternoon, I came home excited about being selected for the regional math competition. "Mom, Mrs. Henderson picked me to represent our school," I announced, waving the permission slip. Mom barely looked up from helping Ethan with his homework. "That's nice, Avery. Just leave the form on the counter. I'll look at it later." Later never came, and I had to forge her signature to participate. The day of the competition, I stood alone among students whose parents had come to cheer them on. I won 2nd place, bringing home a silver medal and certificate. That same evening, Ethan scored his first goal in soccer, and our parents threw an impromptu celebration with his favorite dinner and ice cream cake. My medal was acknowledged with a distracted, "Good job," as they continued fussing over Ethan's athletic breakthrough. By high school, I had fully accepted that my achievements would never receive the same recognition as Ethan's mediocrity. Instead of becoming bitter, I channeled that knowledge into fierce independence. I joined debate club, newspaper staff, and the accounting club without telling my parents. I arranged my own transportation, stayed late at school, and built a network of supportive teachers who saw my potential. Mr. Daniels, my sophomore-year accounting teacher, became a particularly important mentor. "You have a natural talent for this, Avery," he told me after I aced a particularly challenging project. "Have you considered pursuing accounting in college?" His question planted a seed that would later shape my future. When college application season arrived during our senior year, my parents spent countless hours helping Ethan research schools, visiting campuses, and discussing his options. They hired a private counselor to help him write his application essays and improve his SAT scores. "What about you, Avery? Have you thought about college?" my father asked one evening, almost as an afterthought. "I've already submitted applications to 5 schools," I replied. "I've been accepted to 3 so far." The surprise on their faces was almost comical. They hadn't even realized I was applying. "Oh, well, good for you," my mother said. "You've always been so independent." The word independent hung in the air between us. What they called independence was actually neglect dressed up as confidence in my abilities. The acceptance letters continued to arrive, including one from Preston University with its prestigious business program. The same week, Ethan received his acceptance to Preston as well, though his grades and test scores were significantly lower than mine. "Preston has accepted both our children," my father announced proudly at dinner. "Ethan, this is amazing. Your hard work paid off." I sat silently, pushing food around my plate. My hard work wasn't even mentioned. That night, I overheard my parents discussing finances in their bedroom. "Preston is expensive," my mother said. "Can we afford to send both of them?" "We've been saving for Ethan's education since he was born," my father replied. "He needs the support and structure of a good university. Avery's always been academically gifted. She'll qualify for scholarships. She'll be fine." I stood frozen in the hallway, the truth hitting me like a physical blow. They had been saving for Ethan's education, just Ethan's, for 18 years. My education had never been part of their financial planning. I returned to my room and stared at my Preston acceptance letter. I had earned my spot through academic excellence, while Ethan had barely scraped by. Yet he would attend with full parental support, and I would have to find my own way. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would graduate at the top of my class, build a successful career, and never again look to my parents for validation or support. Their lack of faith in me would become my greatest motivation. As senior year came to a close, I watched Ethan bask in the glow of our parents' pride at every milestone. Meanwhile, I quietly collected academic honors, scholarships, and awards that went largely unnoticed at home. But I was no longer doing it for their attention. I was doing it for me, for my future, and for the life I was determined to build on my own terms. The summer before college was a stark study in contrasts. While Ethan enjoyed his last carefree months at home, I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a local cafe and evenings at the public library. Every dollar I earned went straight into my college fund, which still fell woefully short of what I would need. One evening in July, my parents called a family meeting to discuss college preparations. I arrived at the dining table to find a spreadsheet detailing Ethan's college expenses: tuition, housing, meal plan, textbooks, even a monthly allowance for social activities. The total came to nearly $45,000 per year. "We've crunched the numbers," Dad explained proudly, "and we can cover everything Ethan needs for all 4 years at Preston." Mom turned to me with what I recognized as her practical expression. "Avery, we know you're resourceful. Have you looked into financial aid options?" I had done far more than look. I had spent countless nights researching scholarships, filling out FAFSA forms, and writing application essays while Ethan played video games in the next room. "I've secured a partial academic scholarship," I replied evenly, "and I've been accepted into the work-study program. I'll be working at the university accounting office 20 hours a week." "That's our girl," Dad said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "always figuring things out." The unspoken message was clear. Ethan's education was their responsibility. Mine was my own. 2 weeks before move-in day, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother. "I've been saving a little something for your education," she told me. "It's not much, just $5,000, but I want you to have it." I fought back tears. "Grandma, that means everything to me." "I see how hard you work, Avery," she said softly. "And I see what's happening in that house. Don't let it break your spirit. Use it as fuel." When move-in day arrived, my parents rented a small U-Haul for Ethan's belongings. They helped him set up his dorm room, complete with a new laptop, mini fridge, and designer bedding. For me, they offered their car to transport my few possessions, but I declined. I had arranged to carpool with another scholarship student I'd met during orientation. "Call us if you need anything," Mom said as I prepared to leave, though we both knew I wouldn't. Preston University's sprawling campus became my new home, and the business school my sanctuary. While Ethan joined a fraternity and enjoyed the full college experience my parents were funding, I divided my time between classes, my work-study job, and a second part-time position I found at an accounting firm near campus. Our paths rarely crossed during that first semester. When they did, the differences in our lives were painfully obvious. Ethan looked well-rested and carefree. I was perpetually exhausted, surviving on coffee and determination. He complained about boring professors. I couldn't afford to waste a single class I was paying for myself. By midterms, the disparity in our academic performance was becoming evident. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, while Ethan struggled to keep his grades above the minimum required to maintain his enrollment. When our parents visited for family weekend, they spent most of their time meeting with Ethan's academic advisor about strategies for success. "How are your classes going?" Dad asked me during the 15 minutes they spared for coffee before heading back to Ethan's dorm. "I'm at the top of my accounting courses," I said. "Professor Harrington asked me to be his teaching assistant next semester." "That's nice," Mom replied absently, checking her watch. "We should get going. Ethan's fraternity is having a parents' reception." I watched them walk away, feeling a familiar hollowness. But something had changed. The pain was duller now, more distant. Their approval, once so desperately sought, was becoming increasingly irrelevant to my life and goals. As sophomore year began, Ethan and I both declared accounting as our major, though for different reasons. I had discovered a genuine passion for the field and excelled in its logical structures and ethical frameworks. Ethan, from what he told me during our rare interactions, had chosen it because Dad said accountants always have jobs. The contrast in our approaches became increasingly evident. I volunteered for case competitions, joined the Accounting Students Association, and sought out challenging electives. Ethan did the minimum required, often calling me late at night for help with assignments. "Can you explain this concept again?" he'd ask, his voice slurring slightly from whatever fraternity party he'd just left. Part of me resented these calls, but another part recognized an opportunity. "I'll help you understand it," I would say, "but I won't do the work for you." These tutoring sessions revealed something surprising. I had a talent for explaining complex accounting concepts clearly and patiently. This discovery would later open doors I hadn't imagined possible. By the end of sophomore year, our divergent paths were firmly established. Ethan was scraping by academically while enjoying a social life funded by our parents. I was excelling in my classes and building professional connections through my jobs, all while carrying the full weight of my educational expenses. The inequality stung, but it was also shaping me into someone stronger and more determined than I might otherwise have become. While Ethan was learning to depend on our parents' support, I was learning something far more valuable: how to depend on myself. Junior year marked a turning point in my academic journey. Professor Harrington, impressed by my performance as his teaching assistant, recommended me for a prestigious internship at Deloitte during the summer. The selection process was rigorous. Multiple rounds of interviews against candidates from top business schools nationwide. When the acceptance email arrived, I celebrated alone in my apartment with a cup of instant ramen and allowed myself a rare moment of pride. Meanwhile, Ethan was struggling to maintain the minimum GPA required for the accounting program. During one of our infrequent phone calls, he mentioned casually, "Dad's talking to his golf buddy at Ernst & Young about getting me an internship. Pretty cool, right?" I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out the unfairness. While I had earned my opportunity through academic excellence and hard work, Ethan would once again benefit from our parents' connections and support. That summer, I moved to New York City for my internship, sharing a cramped apartment with 3 other interns to save money. The work was challenging and the hours long, but I thrived under pressure. My supervisors took notice, assigning me increasingly complex projects. By the end of summer, I had received a conditional job offer for after graduation, contingent on maintaining my academic standing. Ethan's internship experience was markedly different. Our father had indeed secured him a position at Ernst & Young, but within 3 weeks, I received a late-night call from him. "They expect me to work 60-hour weeks," he complained, "and my supervisor keeps saying my work needs significant improvement. Dad's friend can only protect me so much." "That's how these firms operate," I explained. "It's competitive." "Well, it's not worth it," he declared. "I'm thinking of switching to marketing. Seems more fun." When senior year began, Ethan had indeed changed his major, delaying his graduation by at least a year. Our parents fully supported his decision, providing the additional funding without hesitation. "We just want you to find your passion," I overheard Mom telling him during a video call. I graduated summa cum laude the following spring. My name was called with special recognition at the ceremony, and I received the business school's Outstanding Graduate Award. From my seat among the graduates, I spotted my parents in the audience, their attention focused on their phones as they recorded a video to send to Ethan, who hadn't bothered to attend my graduation. Grandma Grace was there, though, beaming with pride. "I always knew you were exceptional," she whispered as she hugged me after the ceremony. "And you did it all on your own." I started at Deloitte the following month, throwing myself into the demanding world of public accounting. The learning curve was steep, but my years of self-reliance had prepared me well. While other new associates struggled with the workload and pressure, I had been managing similar challenges since freshman year. 2 years into my career, I had already received an early promotion to senior associate and was on track for manager, an accomplishment that typically took twice as long. My specialty in forensic accounting had caught the attention of senior partners, and I was assigned to high-profile cases involving financial fraud investigations. Ethan eventually graduated with his marketing degree and bounced between entry-level positions. "The job market is tough," he complained during our parents' anniversary dinner. "Companies just don't recognize talent anymore." And what he didn't mention was that he had been let go from his last two positions for poor performance and attendance issues. I had heard the real story from a former classmate who worked at one of those companies. At that same dinner, our parents proudly announced they had helped Ethan with the down payment on a condo. "We want to give you both the best start in life," Dad said, though they had offered me no such assistance. "I'm doing fine," I replied, and I was. My promotions had come with substantial salary increases, and I had nearly paid off my student loans through disciplined saving and strategic career moves. 3 years into my career, I was approached by a boutique forensic accounting firm specializing in high net worth divorce cases. The position offered a significant salary increase and partnership track. I accepted without hesitation. My new role brought unexpected visibility. I was quoted in financial publications and invited to speak at industry conferences. At one such event, I ran into Professor Harrington, now nearing retirement. "I use you as an example to my students," he told me over coffee, "of what determination and intelligence can achieve without advantages or connections." His words struck a chord. For years, I had seen my lack of parental support as a disadvantage, but perhaps it had been my greatest advantage all along. While Ethan continued to rely on our parents well into his 30s, I had built something entirely my own. The contrast became even clearer when Ethan lost his job again and moved back into our parents' house temporarily. That temporary stay stretched to 6 months, then a year. Our parents converted their home office into a bedroom for him and adjusted their retirement plans to accommodate his needs. During a rare family dinner, Ethan complained about his latest career setback. "The company was mismanaged," he insisted. "They didn't appreciate what I brought to the table." I noticed the gray in our parents' hair, the worry lines that hadn't been there before. They were approaching retirement age, but still supporting their adult son. "Have you considered further education?" I suggested. "Maybe an MBA or specialized certification?" "Easy for you to say," Ethan snapped. "Not everyone is a workaholic like you, Avery." Our parents quickly changed the subject, protecting Ethan from any suggestion that he might be responsible for his own circumstances. As I drove home that night, I reflected on our divergent paths. Ethan had received every advantage: financial support, connections, second chances, yet struggled to maintain steady employment. I had received none of those benefits but had built a successful career through self-reliance and determination. The inequality that had once caused me such pain now seemed almost irrelevant. Our parents' favoritism had shaped us both, but not in the ways they had intended. Their support had crippled Ethan's independence, while their neglect had forged my resilience. The call came on a Tuesday evening as I was reviewing documents for a high-profile case. My mother's voice sounded thin and fragile through the phone. "Your father's had a heart attack," she said without preamble. "We're at Memorial Hospital." I was on the next flight home, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By the time I arrived at the hospital, my father had been moved from the ICU to a private room. He looked smaller somehow, diminished against the white hospital sheets, with tubes and monitors surrounding him. My mother sat beside his bed, her hand clutching his. Ethan was sprawled in a chair in the corner, scrolling through his phone. "The doctors say he'll recover," Mom explained, "but he needs triple bypass surgery, and after that, significant lifestyle changes." Dad managed a weak smile when he saw me. "Avery, you didn't need to come all this way." "Of course I did," I replied, squeezing his hand gently. Later, in the hospital cafeteria, my mother outlined the situation in stark terms. Dad's health insurance would cover most of the medical expenses, but their financial situation was more precarious than I had realized. The economic downturn had hit their retirement investments hard. They had also taken out a second mortgage on their house 2 years earlier to help Ethan start a business venture that had quickly failed. "We're not destitute," Mom said, stirring her untouched coffee. "But your father can't go back to work, and our savings won't last as long as we'd planned." I nodded, processing this information. "What about the medical bills that insurance won't cover?" Mom looked down. "We'll figure something out. Maybe sell the lake house." The lake house had been in our family for generations. It was where my grandparents had lived out their final years, where I had spent summers with Grandma Grace after she was widowed. The thought of it passing out of our family sent a pang through my chest. "I can help," I said firmly. "I'm in a good position financially." Mom looked surprised, as if the thought hadn't occurred to her. "Oh, we couldn't ask that of you, Avery. You've worked so hard for what you have." "You're not asking, I'm offering." When we returned to Dad's room, Ethan was still on his phone. "Hey, so I might need to head out soon," he said without looking up. "I've got this networking thing tonight that could lead to a job opportunity." Mom nodded encouragingly. "Of course, sweetie. Your father understands." I bit my tongue. Dad had just suffered a heart attack, and Ethan couldn't miss a networking thing? After Ethan left, I spoke with Dad's doctors. The bypass surgery was scheduled for Thursday, with a recovery period of at least 6 weeks. He would need significant care at home, dietary changes, and a carefully monitored exercise regimen. "Someone will need to be with him during the day for the first few weeks," the cardiologist explained. Mom looked overwhelmed. "I don't know how. I still work part-time, and Ethan has his job search. I'll take a leave of absence," I said decisively. "I have accumulated leave, and my firm has a family care policy." The next morning, I called my managing partner to explain the situation. She was immediately supportive. "Family comes first, Avery. Take the time you need." I arranged for remote work where possible and delegated my ongoing cases to colleagues. By that afternoon, I had organized a 6-week leave and set up a workstation in my parents' guest room. Dad's surgery went well, but recovery was harder than any of us had anticipated. He was in pain, frustrated by his limitations, and depressed about the financial implications of his illness. Mom tried her best, but was clearly overwhelmed by the medical details and care requirements. Ethan visited occasionally, usually for an hour or two, bringing takeout food that Dad wasn't supposed to eat, and talking mainly about his own problems. "This job market is impossible," he complained during one visit, while Dad lay pale and exhausted after a difficult physical therapy session. I took over Dad's care during the day, coordinating with doctors, managing his medications, preparing heart-healthy meals, and helping with his exercises. In the evenings, I worked remotely on the cases I could handle from afar. The days were long and exhausting, but I found unexpected satisfaction in being able to help my father heal. One evening, about 3 weeks after the surgery, I was helping Dad walk around the backyard when he suddenly spoke. "I never gave you enough credit, Avery." I looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" He paused, leaning more heavily on my arm. "I always thought Ethan needed us more. That you were self-sufficient." He took a labored breath. "I was wrong. We should have supported you equally." The admission, so long awaited, hit me with unexpected force. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "It's okay, Dad," I finally managed. "It worked out." He shook his head. "No, it's not okay. Your mother and we failed you. And look at us now. You're the one we're depending on." That night, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and insurance forms. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed. "I don't know how we're going to manage all this," she admitted. "The co-pays alone." I sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about that. I want to cover Dad's medical expenses." "Avery, no. That's too much to ask." "It's not too much," I insisted. "I'm in a position to help, and I want to." She stared at me for a long moment. "We never supported you the way we should have." "No," I agreed quietly. "You didn't." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know why it wasn't fair to you." "No, it wasn't." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of years of inequality hanging between us. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "I'm so sorry, Avery." It wasn't enough. Couldn't erase decades of favoritism, but it was a start. The following week brought another crisis. Ethan showed up at the house agitated and defensive. He had been evicted from his apartment for non-payment of rent and needed a place to stay, just until I get back on my feet. Mom immediately offered him his old room, but I intervened. Dad needs quiet and rest, I pointed out, and that room is directly above his. So what am I supposed to do? Ethan demanded. You could stay with friends, I suggested, or get a short-term rental. With what money? He snapped. The argument that followed was ugly. Ethan accused me of trying to turn our parents against him. Mom tried to mediate, suggesting compromises that all involved Ethan getting his way. Dad, hearing the raised voices, came downstairs despite doctor's orders to rest. Enough, he said, his voice weak but firm. Ethan, your sister is right. I need peace and quiet to recover. You'll need to find another arrangement. The shock on Ethan's face mirrored my own. For perhaps the first time in our lives, Dad had sided with me over Ethan in a direct conflict. That night, after Ethan had stormed out and my parents had gone to bed, I sat alone on the back porch, trying to process the day's events. The family dynamics that had shaped my entire life were shifting, forced into new patterns by crisis and necessity. I wasn't naive enough to think everything had changed. Decades of established patterns don't disappear overnight. But something had begun to shift, a rebalancing that, while painful, felt necessary and long overdue.